right, we're back with the right stream. I'm sorry about that. Anywho, what I was saying,
Continuing on.
what I was saying before, we're in our not usual setup for the dye-a-thon, which probably got me tripped up. Um, so instead of actually dyeing a disc for this dye-a-thon, we're going to show you how we prep stencils for dyeing discs, or at least Brittany is for sure. We'll see if I can get my stuff configured to do mine. But yeah, Brittany's going to show how she does stencils from start to finish and some tips and tricks that she may have, I think. So take it away again.
Might be helpful, might not. Who knows?
Yes.
I'll be curious to see too, like what everybody else says. Like, oh, I do this instead. Maybe I'll get some tips along the way. So I was saying I got a request for a U.S. Navy logo. So I was looking. I just typed in U.S. Navy logo SVG. A lot of times, the problem you see with SVGs is it's already filled with black where you want color. So I like specifically look for ones like this and this where it's just the outline. And these letters are going to be white, so them being solid black is actually fine. So that's why I went with this design here. And like these stripes here are going to be red, but they're separate still. Some of these images had like that either empty or kind of all filled in together with the black without that separation. So this will work out perfectly where I can peel those and get red. I can leave the letters white and I can color everything else in. So I chose this stencil. I bought it off Etsy. It does add a little expense, but that's what I did.
How much are stencils or signs like that off of Etsy roughly?
That one was $4. Usually I can get stencils for like $2. And I always look for deals and stuff too. But I thought for this we should do it legit, right? Don't want anybody coming after us. All right, so this I just downloaded it from Etsy and I can just drag it from there to here. Bam.
So
I'm using Silhouette Studio.
I was gonna say to preface this, you're using Windows and you're using the Silhouette software.
Yep, Silhouette software, which is for Cameo. If Dave gets to do his, you can see Cricut, hopefully. So yeah, I do that, and then I take my disc, I measure all the way across, and this guy wants it on a wraith, which is typically pretty domey. So I look at like the whole, I don't know what you guys can see right now, the whole length of it, but since it's so domey, I like to kind of go in a little bit further where the dominess kind of starts, and I'll measure across there. So like 7.25, let's say. And that's like how much I want to fill. So I go to this little circle icon, make a circle, you hold down the tab button and it makes it a perfect circle instead of like an oval. And I go to the width or the height up here, put in 7.25. I center that with this guy here, center to page, bam. And then I'm going to select my stencil and I'm going to make it bigger because I basically want it to be that 7.25. I might go a little bit inside of it, kind of avoiding that dominess, to be honest, and it works fine with this. It'll make it a lot easier to apply.
So not to interrupt you, and because I wasn't paying attention, what file did you import? Was it an SVG file?
I actually usually go with the PNGs. I don't
Okay.
know why. They seem to work just fine.
Gotcha. I
Yeah.
say that because, from my knowledge, the software, you need to have the paid version to actually import or use SVG files.
Okay.
Xander, back me up here.
I have no idea.
I was gonna say, Xander, wait, never mind. You use like 10 versions behind everybody. So.
I copy and paste stuff all the time also. So like I could just go here copy image and bring it over, copy and paste. I do it all the time.
So you imported a PNG file, then it vectorizes it for all intents and purposes, correct?
Yeah, and this one was a cut file,
Mhm.
but it's not always a cut file.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
What if you have an image that isn't transparent and has like a white background? Does it remove that, or do you have to do any other steps?
Oh, no, it's a lot harder then. So I definitely look for either a lot of contrast where the black lines really stand out,
Mhm.
or try to find files like this as much as I can. I also often draw on my drawing tablet. If there's just not enough contrast, I'll just trace the lines. Definitely adds time and work, but you can also kind of customize it so it's not terrible.
Gotcha. And the comments are saying yes, you need a paid version for anything besides JPEG, which I remember I was messing around with it. I was like, oh, that's kind of lame. But there's always,
Paid version. I don't pay anything.
yeah. But as far as I know, like I said, uh, you can't import unless you have, like, have you ever tried to import an SVG file?
Um, I don't know. Probably, and that's why I
Uh,
started doing PNGs because the SVG didn't work. I've been doing PNGs for so long, I don't remember why.
gotcha.
But it's almost always an option, especially if you buy them. So I
Yeah.
just do the PNGs. I have noticed sometimes when you do SVGs, like, there's, like, black in the background. Maybe that's why, because I'm not paying. I don't know.
So I have so many questions because I honestly don't know the Silhouette software.
No,
But
questions are great.
is there like a layers panel so you can see your layers? Like you have your PNG in that circle. Can you actually see those layers and rearrange them?
I should have prefaced this with, I am not tech savvy, I'm showing you my way.
Okay, that's fine.
Layers, I don't know. So, like, what do you mean? Like,
How do,
this would be
how do you put something in front of something or behind something?
yeah, you can, like, send to back and bring to front.
Okay,
There's that. Um, layering on top, there's so the panel I use the most is this guy. So you can,
okay.
like, intersect and crop. I use crop a lot,
So
and you can kinda
those
layer things that way.
the technical term for that is a Boolean operation.
Yeah.
Where you can combine stuff, remove stuff with shapes or whatever. So
Yeah, so my cheat for that is to offset. If I want to, like, cut something out of something, I will offset the image I want to layer. So the offset, right? Where is it? Anyways, I'll hit the offset button here. Like, if I wanted to do this, offset, and then just do, like, really tiny offset, so it's, like, just an outline of it. And then I still have the image, and, like, let's say, send back. I will crop it, and I can layer things that way. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyways, there's ways around it.
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
7.25 is, like, where I want the image. Center that. I'm back in the circle thing. Alright. Take that guy, center that guy, and, like, this already has the cut lines, but, you would go to trace, select trace area, do that, and then trace. Sometimes you gotta, like, make it a little more solid with the threshold.
So this is
Eh,
the part where it vectorizes it.
this just makes the cut lines. I don't know,
Okay. Yeah,
'cause yeah, this usually would be all black, but it had the cut lines, which is why there's that red there.
yeah. Okay.
But I don't have to do that, so because it's already got cut lines. Back to center. So at this point, a lot of times I will make an itty bitty little circle. Oh, Again, using that tab to make it round and not oval. And then I'll make it like orange or something that stands out and center that. And if it works with the image, I will leave it in there. Just do it like really tiny and leave it in there. And then you can find that for centering. Um, if it doesn't work with the image, I still use it, but I just eyeball. So like keep that circle, center this guy, cut this, and then I'll center this so I know where to look for.
Yeah.
And I
Right on.
use clear so I can just eyeball it.
You.
And then when I go to print, like this one, you can hide it in that little line there. I can zoom so you can see it. So there'd just be like this tiny little dot. I probably wouldn't use it for this one, but
Right on.
the other thing I wanted to mention is because this one already had it, but always fill it in with black. Like it helps you when you're cutting. And then my settings are force 14, speed 5, blade depth 2, passes 1, and hit send.
Right on. How did you find those settings for cutting?
No idea. I think I saw it in like one of the dyers groups when I first started and used it and it worked and just stuck with it. I have done force or blade depth one or two, it doesn't seem to matter. I use them both. I think they're kind of weird settings because every time I tell somebody that's what I do, they're like, "What? That's
Ah.
crazy." But it's worked just fine for me. So,
So basically, everything is working on hope, dream, and a prayer, and what has worked in the past.
what? Yeah, I don't have time to sit here and mess around with things. I just figure things out as I go.
I feel like a lot of people, once they've figured out once and what's working, they don't necessarily go back and change anything.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's working. Why would you change it?
I mean, you're not wrong.
But, like, when I had that really bad vinyl, I
Yeah.
was changing settings left and right trying to figure it out, and then I just came to the conclusion it was the vinyl. Got new vinyl and went back to my old settings, and everything was fine.
So Roxy said that's a lot of force.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Throwing dimes. Yeah, blade settings said that. And throwing dime says I clean my blade, but set to vinyl and go. Xander said I'm on force 5, depth 2, speed 5 or less. And Roxy does blade depth 3, force 6, speed 4, and 1 pass. You can
So no one in this chat is doing these same numbers. Where did we come up with this?
I still want to get a silhouette and experiment with it because I feel like you have more settings than on a Cricut, which can be a good thing, but also more of a pain in the
Yeah.
butt.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
are you gonna use all those settings that you have?
well, you can fine tune it to,
Yeah.
maybe the humidity is slightly different. The vinyl is cutting differently, so you can
Yeah.
change it.
Because you just do, like, washi tape or something?
Basically, I'll try to show it, but the settings that I can change are just the pressure. Like
Pressure?
you can't change the speed or depth.
Yeah.
Um,
The I will change speed or force. I have changed it here and there on, like, a really detailed thing, but I feel like it still pulls up the tiny stuff, and I still have to put it back in place, so hasn't really done much for me.
yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Well, you guys have questions. I'm going to try to set up my screen.
Yeah. I came up with this idea very last minute and, was like, "Dave, figure out technology."
We'll
He's
get
like,
it
"Yeah,
squared away.
sure. We got this."
So you'll see some inner workings here, but
But yeah, a lot of times I use this, like I said, this is the main thing, and I just keep it down here because I use it quite a bit. Um, this is already made, but if you wanted to, like, you can release it and move pieces around. So you use the release a lot?
So I'm not sharing your screen anymore.
Okay,
I'm sharing
good.
mine.
I'm gonna go now. I can go see you in the chat, and I'll feel way more comfortable because that was weird not seeing.
So let's see. Uh,
Do I have the old chat still, or is it the same?
you should have the new one. I updated the. You know, it's going to be slightly blurry, but just squint your eyes, I guess.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You get what you get. Anyways, I have been doing a lot of AI generated stuff, and I've used different AI sites for various things. I've been using ChatGPT currently for a lot of my images. I also use Midjourney. Midjourney, that's paid. I think it's like $10 a month. ChatGPT, I do have the paid version because I just use it so much. But you can generate images, and I find getting specific stencils work better with ChatGPT. But find your AI image generator of choice, and they've come a long,
Mhm.
long way. Um, Things that I typically do to get the stuff that I'm looking for is I usually say black and white stencil or black and white, and either I say coloring book to get the basically just the outlines without any color fill, or sometimes I say a tattoo style because that style usually is more outlined type stuff, but typically has a little bit more black in there. But I generated a bunch of eagles. Like the first one I did here, this is looks like it was an image that was just outlined with some threshold with contrast. And I did one that was more artistic in style. And I want to pull this one in and show you guys what I do and how I would potentially clean this up because it is more sketched and there's a lot of fiddly details that you may not necessarily want when you're doing a stencil. Like a lot of, I call them islands or standalone pieces that are super small, like say dots.
Yeah.
Um, I'll show you how I do that. Now, there isn't necessarily a super easy way to do that, depending on what program you're using. Um, and I'll show you how I fix some stuff. Like for this one, there's the giant gap that goes up that wing right there. I want to
Mhm.
close that off, and I'll show you how I do that. Now, the stuff that I use, again, it's what I'm familiar with and what I've used in my design career. So I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I use Adobe products. So I mainly do all my editing in Adobe Illustrator. Um, Depending on the situation, I might bring in the Photoshop before I bring it to Illustrator. But yeah, so if you don't necessarily want to purchase an image, you can try AI generation. Now, you may come up with a few more fingers or toes or weird things. That's inherent. But I would try to get your images from a reputable source, like Etsy. But I was going to even say there's a caveat with that, that people selling these images may not necessarily have the rights to do so.
Yes.
So if they're selling Disney characters, they don't have the rights to sell
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, I always read off to the side on Etsy, it'll say, like, whether or not you can if there's a limit on how many you can make or whatever, if you're allowed to.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and a lot of those images on Etsy are also AI, so it's like I'm paying someone else to make a free image,
Yeah.
but also it saves me time, so sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, depending on what it is. So, typically, when I'm looking for images, I try to find vector imaged first if I am looking for something. If not, then I try to find a transparent PNG. If not, any black and white image works because I've been using this site called vectorize.ai. This has been the best site slash program that I've used to vectorize images because it's also using AI to vectorize it. So it's interpolating certain things, like certain lines that others just guess on. So it does a really good job if you have a really bad image. And yeah.
Are there, like, settings in Vectorize AI? Like, what? Because 'cause I've tried to use it, and maybe it was the image I used, not gotten great results. Everybody loves it. I know everybody else loves it.
So the settings are very limited,
Okay.
and I wanted to pull this one specifically if I can. I want to show what a colored one looks like that is not necessarily black and white. But the first thing that I'm going to show is that artistic rendition. Basically, the settings that you have in here are your color palette, which I'm going to cancel this and actually show the colored one instead. If I can find it. So I have not keeping up with the comments. So if you see anything, just yeah.
Well, Throwing Dimes did say gray lines as well, like, how do you get rid of those? And I think this kind of answers that, doesn't it?
It does, and as you can see in here, it vectorized it and it used colors to the best of its ability. So, like you can see where this gradation was, it tried to
Mhm.
break up that gradation into colors. And in this upper hand corner, it says that there's 30 colors, but you can limit the number of colors to reduce that. So,
Oh.
for example, for this one, I can limit it to 3 colors, or I can limit it to 2. But if I limit it to 2, it's just going to be black. But I can limit it to 3, and after I download it, I can remove the brown, just leaving the black and the well, it doesn't have white because it also just did this light tan color. So in this instance, it, there's going to be some more cleanup that I'm going to have to do around the beak area because it's so jaggedy. But I would choose 3 colors, and it's going to do its thing. And when I export it, I can have the export group it by colors. And when I download it or export it, it's going to be a vector file. There's a bunch of different stuff that you can do in here, but file format again I have as SVG, which is a pretty popular vector format. I think SVG stands for scalable vector graphic, or
Yes.
um, SVG version doesn't matter. Draw style, I have fill shapes. So, but there's this group by. I wish the screen wasn't so blurry. But there's a group by, and I choose by color. So that is super easy. It groups all the colors, and I can easily delete that color. Just trying to think of any other things in here. I think there's one with like strokes that I don't have strokes. I just only have fill shapes. Because that's kind of a different thing. Yeah. Then I hit download, and I download it. Then I open it, and I open it up in Adobe Illustrator. And that is my program of choice.
Is that that's something you pay, like, annual for?
It is. So it is
Mhm.
part of the Adobe Creative Cloud, and it's not necessarily cheap, but if you do this for a living,
Well, yeah, you use it for lots of things.
yeah, I think it's 65, $70 a month for the whole suite, but that gets you basically everything. Uh, Minimize some things here, but this is what it looks like when it's in here. And this is what I was talking about layers, is you can see all the different layers. Um, so for this, I can basically delete that brown color and I'm left with just the black and white vector format. Now, there's some jaggedies in here that I would want to go in and fix. And
Mm.
with vectors, there's a few ways you can do that, but vectors are basically plotted points that you can go to the anchor point and remove them.
Yeah, you can do that in Cameo too,
So
somewhat.
that's one way you can do it, and that's pretty universal in most vector editing programs. The and there's specific tools for specific programs. Like I have an eraser tool in here somewhere that I can actually erase stuff with. There we go. Yeah.
I use that on Cameo quite a bit. Just go around and erase the little tiny dots and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you can do that. Um, so
Throwing
it's
Dimes says I'm on Paint 3D.
whatever works.
Yeah.
The other tool that I have in here that I use is a smooth tool. So what I do is I select my object and I go to my smooth tool and I basically draw to smooth it out. And it takes like all the really harsh jaggedies out, but not necessarily the super wigglies.
The harsh shaggity's not the super wigglies. Got it, guys?
Yes.
Roxy said, "Can you just simplify the anchors?"
So you can. There's another thing that you can do. See if I can go to another part of this image that is got some of the jaggies. Is
Mhm.
I can select my object and I can go to uh see if that's gonna show up, where that's gonna show up. Trying to get the contextual menu, but I can simplify the shape or I can smooth it. I don't know why my contextual menu is not showing up to do that. But basically, you can reduce the amount of anchor points to reduce the amount of jaggities. Uh, yeah. Again, I don't know why it's not showing the contextual menu. Oop. Okay. Actually, kind of see right there. Uh, you got to select the object first, then go to simplify. Then it just, oh, it's right there. So I can go super simple and it should reduce the amount of anchor points, or I can go super complex and it makes more. So that's one way to do that. So there was the simplify as well as smooth. Let's see if I can do the smooth.
Yeah, both of those things are also on Cameo. It's like the whole image. You can hit simplify and it kinda just deletes some points for you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
So you can, this is like 100%. It's looking like a Picasso painting here. So the computer I'm on is chugging along because I'm also doing other things. But yeah, you can smooth out the paths as well uh, for that. And there is, I think, a way in Inkscape to specify any shape, blow, or a specific size to be removed. So a lot of these dots or blobs, you can say like a millimeter dot. I like to use the metric system in this freedom to die. uh, but you can specify certain sizes and remove that.
That's
Um,
nice.
yeah. So the other thing that I do sometimes is I make sure everything is ungrouped. I take my
Yeah.
main object, move it away, or put it somewhere that I know that I can find it again, or I go to my layers and I actually find that layer and hide it. And you see all these schnibbles here? I can just go like this and delete the schnibbles. There's like
Mhm.
super small schnibble there.
Yep.
So I try to remove any of those islands because cutting those, one, takes time, two, is you're not even gonna,
Pointless. It's not
yeah.
gonna work out good.
And you have to figure out what size cutter that you, or what size shape you can cut. And I'm working on, I have it, but a test pattern that you can figure out and dial in your cut settings as well as to see what the smallest shape is that you can cut. So that's basically what I do in Illustrator is I clean up the image that was vectorized from Vectorize AI. Um, things to note when you are finding images, that anything with a gradation is going to be a pain in the ass.
Mhm.
Um, so like you saw with this, his neck right there got all funky and weird. Um, oh god, my computer's chugging along. So, um, since it's already in an SVG, I can save it as an SVG, or I would go and file save it as an SVG. But I, with the Cricut software, if you have a lot of paths, it can really take a long time for it to import. So one thing that you want to do if you want to import an actual vector is select all your stuff and you make it a compound path. Basically, it just means that it acts as one giant thing, so all the schnibbles are kind of like welded together, but it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily do anything different. It just makes Cricut likes the compound path better because it acts as one layer versus a shit ton.
Mhm.
You can see all the layer items of all the little schnibbles. But
Yeah.
if I make it a compound path, it makes it one layer. So maybe the layers um, the Cricut software doesn't like. But you can also export it as a transparent PNG. So if you are using Silhouette and you are on the free version, you can do that as well. Or if you get the paid version, you can import that for that. So I'm going to save that as the SVG. I'm also going to export it as a PNG to show you potentially the differences with that. Illustrator specific, just PNG. Don't necessarily want to use the artboard. You hit export. Sure.
So can you like copy and paste in a Cricut? Or does it have to be a file that you
You
open?
know, I don't think you can because you'll see in a bit. So yeah, make sure the background is transparent.
You need to have a transparent background.
You don't necessarily need it, but it
Okay.
helps a lot.
Yeah, I don't think it makes a difference at all in
Uh,
Cameo.
so I'm going to open up the Cricut software. The really bummer thing is you need an internet connection to actually
Mhm.
use the software, because I experienced the other day that they were under maintenance and I couldn't even use the software for a few hours. Silhouette Studio, you don't, which is a good thing. Also, random updates that happen when you haven't used it in a while, and a bunch of pop-ups and stuff like that. So I'm going to start a new project. So this is a new project, and you need to actually upload your image. You can't copy and paste images. Back to my download. So I'm just trying. I'm going to upload a flat image to show you what that does. That means it's not transparent or anything like
Mhm.
that. It's just,
Like straight from AI?
yeah, straight from AI, which
Okay.
I think this one is, I
But not
believe.
copy and pasted, it's downloaded
Yeah.
as a file.
So with this, you can get the Cricut All Access to automatically remove the background. But if you're cheap and don't want to
Mhm.
pay for that, you have to go in and manually erase. Basically, you select where it is. So all the white spaces, you have to select it so it's transparent. Pain in the butt. So if you can get a transparent PNG and don't have to do the step, save you time as well as other frustration. Because every little enclosed space you have to click, you just can't click, hey, this color, I want gone.
Huh. That seems so complicated,
Yes, unless you get the Cricut Access.
but I'm sure it can do a lot more.
It can do it automatically to remove the background. Um, or I could be misspeaking, or it's just going to do the free trial. Yeah, it does the free trial because it's got a watermark over it. Super lame. But that's if you just do something straight up. Um, but if you have like an SVG file, it will be perfectly fine. Everything will be transparent. Uh, and you'd be good to go for that. So that that is that. Uh, uploading a transparent PNG is damn near identical. There's just some other steps that or windows that you go through to do it, I believe. Since it is transparent, you don't have to worry about removing the background because it's already removed. But it's also going to ask you, is there multiple layers? Like if you have colors, it would separate it by colors, or if it's a single layer or flat graphic. Um, yeah, so just a single layer to continue. I think that was the only additional step that pops up if you have a non-vectored image. Yeah, you basically get the same thing. The thing with vectored images, you can, I believe, do some editing of the vectored image while you're here. So once I have my image in there and I know the size of the disk or area that I want that to be, is I create a shape and I change that shape size to whatever I want. So if I want the size of the disk, so I have a reference 8.25, 8 and a quarters, or 8.2 inches is the typical dimensions of a disk, depending on what it is. Uh, change the color, change layers. So right now, what you're seeing is the actual size of the disk, and I position the stamp or the stencil of like, okay, that looks about right. Depending on the stamp, you can align it. So if I want to make sure that's in the center, because that's pretty centered, but don't necessarily always want to rely on aligning like that. You want to visually align it
Yeah, you have to adjust a lot.
so the composition looks how you want it to look. And like you, what I do is I also create another circle, not oval, circle. And quick side note, I don't do literally almost no editing within the Cricut software. So I am not necessarily proficient or know everything with that. There's some basic stuff that you can do, like again, the Boolean operations. I can add some text, but I do all my editing in outside programs, and I just use the Cricut software as the interface for the machine
Mhm.
to actually cut the stuff.
I'm the opposite. I do all of mine in
Yeah.
Cameo or Silhouette, and
I
you
think
find weird ways around things sometimes.
so. I have like for the little dot, I think I make it 0.03 inches, and yeah, I select both of those. you could technically group this because it's going to be moving, but then I line everything like that. Yeah, make that red so you can maybe see it. Again, that red dot is the center
Mhm.
of where that stencil is, and I typically cut it no matter what, unless it's going to be super obvious because I take a little scrap vinyl and I cover it up if it's not going to be part of the black.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah,
How many
that,
times have you missed the cover it step?
you know,
Yeah,
that's besides the point.
I miss it sometimes, and that's why I'm like, I only do it if it's, like, already black there. And then sometimes you miss the little dot to peel off, but then you see it, and you're like, "Oh, I gotta peel that still."
So then I hide that circle reference image. I select that little anything that I want to cut and make sure that it stays in place, because if I go to make right now, it's going to place that dot somewhere else because it's not necessarily grouped together. I should save this real quick. I think I might have to turn on my machine to actually get that. Yeah. So you can see it put that little dot on one mat and the eagle on another mat, which surprised that you did that. But
Weird.
I grab both of them, then I hit attach. So on the bottom left hand corner, you have the different Boolean operations, but attach basically groups it together. But yeah, weird terms.
Roxy said you can just kiss cut that circle on Cameo. Like, the little tiny circle in the middle?
Hmm.
And what does kiss cut mean? Just like it just shows up, but it doesn't go all the way through? How
You
do you do that?
typically kiss cutting is just cutting outside of that shape is the technical term of kiss cutting. I don't know what else it means by that. Um, but then on my mat, not horribly important, but it's a 12 by 12 and there's a grid, and I take that center dot and make it sure that it's on the center, which doesn't matter too much, but yeah, that's just what I do. Then I'm going to quickly turn on my machine real quick so I can show you some settings. It's going to scan for my machine, and the setting that I use about 99% of the time with Oracle 651 Matte Black is called the washi sheet. I can't even say that. Washi sheet setting. So there is a bunch of different materials. And I'm going to go to the material settings. And what you can see here in the material settings is the name, the cut pressure, and if it's doing a multi-cut, and the specific blade type. So they have a bunch of already pre-built stuff. So if you look at the vinyl, the only setting you can do is the pressure, and that is at 107. What that number means, heck if I know. And it's only doing one cut, and it's using the fine point blade, which is that. And if you look at the washi sheet, it has a lower pressure of 85. So, and I don't know if I have it in here, but I you can create your own material. So if you want something specific, when you're doing your testing for the pressure settings, you find one that works better than a preset, you can add a new material for that, so you don't necessarily have to uh, rely on these predefined stuff, or you can actually edit that specific material. Just remember what it was, because I don't think you can necessarily go back for that. So again, 99% I use washi sheet. Um, there may be some instances like a certain hard to cut thing that I might try with other things, but oh yeah, it does look like I created a new material called Oracle 651 Matte Black.
And are your settings saved, or do you have to pick them every time?
The
Like, as a
setting,
default settings
you have to the settings are saved, but you have to pick the material.
every
Um,
time? You can't set like, a default?
no. So in this where you have to set the material, you actually have to select. You can put, like, bookmark it in here so you have your
It's just, like, right
favorites.
on top?
Yeah. But you do have to physically click that. Uh, so yeah, that's washi sheet. Should just select that and go to town. So that's how I do that. Now there's a few other things that I want to show within the Adobe that I not necessarily forgot, but want to show.
Roxy, I wanna know how you kiss cut. She said it doesn't go all the way through. How you do that with the circle? Like, you select it. Do you go in afterwards and do it? Do you do it all at once? Curious.
I'm I think you could do the same thing with the crap. You'd have with the Cricut software, you can't do multiple pressure settings. It's like one or nothing, like the washi sheet, that's
Mhm,
it for everything on there.
mhm.
But you could do maybe not. I'll say like do two cuts, but do it twice with a different setting.
Yeah. I actually had to do that the other day. I, like, forgot to add something or something, and I was like, "If I just leave this in here, can I just cut it again?" And it worked, and I was like, "Cool."
So one thing that you necessarily didn't forget to show is how you create that white offset when you're doing your stencils. So when you do your stencils, you have that white outline, or you have that outline that you leave white, so
Mhm.
that background. I feel like Silhouette's super easy how to do that.
I did kinda show it because when I showed
Mm,
how I you literally just click a button and adjust the size, but then
yeah,
sometimes you have to go in and, like, un what is it called? Release all the things and then, like, take out a few that you don't want. So that it's just the outline.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no easy way to do that with an Illustrator. Uh, I can outline the stroke, but what that does is the entire stroke, not on like the complete outside of this, because if I can move it over here, this is transparent, so it's going to put it on both sides.
Yeah, it does the same thing, but I can easily take out the inside ones that I don't want
Gotcha. Uh,
by moving the main image, releasing the offset, taking out the inside ones, and putting the image back.
there you go.
But you
So,
can't the only problem with it is you can't make the offset with the image because it will color in the wrong things. So I usually leave it unmaked.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So how I do it in Illustrator is I use the stroke, and I put the stroke to whatever the thickness that I want. There's different things that you can align the stroke to, so you can align it to the center of the line, the inside of the line, which is kind of a bad example until I make it really small, or the outside of the line. And for this, I want it to be on the outside because it's going to apply the stroke only on the outside of that line. So if I go to the center, it's going to get all, you can, but you don't. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, but I look at the stroke and okay, that line, at least on the outside, is what I'm going for thickness if I want that to be cut out as well. So right now, that is just a stroke. Then I have to, I wish you could see this contextual menu, but I outlined the stroke to make it an actual path.
Mhm.
Then Let's see if I can ungroup some stuff here.
I would show him, but we had to switch everything over to his to share it.
Yeah. Um, can I do this? No, I can't. There's a somewhat easy way where you can use a paint bucket to fill things in. Um, I maybe should find a better and faster way to do this. But what I've been doing is I just been filling in the shape manually by tracing it for the most part, roughly. 'Cause
What?
you don't have to be perfect.
Is all the way around though?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much harder. My one complaint about Cameo that I have is you can't like select things and color them in.
Yeah.
It has to be like one color. At least
So
not that I know of.
there is a way, like I said, to use a paint bucket that it
Mhm.
smartly knows where the voids are, which can work. But typically, I just do this, which, right or wrong, it's the way I do it.
That's awful.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
No, I mean, it looks so tedious.
It it can be. There's I probably other and faster ways. If anybody has some suggestions, uh, let me know. But for
Roxy
time,
says and Xander say I can fill in different colors on the same image. I just don't know how to do it.
so for all intents and purposes, that's all filled in. Then the Pathfinder or the Boolean, select everything, and I mash it together. Pretend that's just a solid, you know, image. Then I can bring my stencil back up. Then they pretend we're looking at this. um, then the red would be where everything would cut. Um, so yeah, that's basically what I do to outline that, and it will only cut that outline. Technically, that's called kiss cutting. But then it'll also cut the. Actually, what I do is I select both of them, go to the Boolean operation, which is the Pathfinder, and I reverse because it's not. Get some other things going on here. I do this because
Uh-huh.
wherever there's an edge, it's going to cut. So I just took that stencil and reversed it out, so it's only, you know, just that color.
Throwing Dime says that's too much. Show us the way, Britt. But you can only do it on Cameo. So
Yeah, I mean,
Cricut has an offset option.
yeah. Which let's see, I don't think I've used it before. But if we go to
Just for
here,
the outside of images.
well, yeah, there is. Maybe I'm making things more hard than what they should be. I'm gonna detach that, select this shape, and there's this offset tool.
Is that just it? And it's
Yep,
done.
and it's done. There you go. Look at that. Well, it didn't like in its head. It didn't work there for whatever reason. Because if I have like a really small offset, yeah, it doesn't do like the complete outside. That's kind of annoying. But there is an offset. It's just yeah. I apply it. And I guess you can do some Boolean operations, so you could technically fill that shape in as well if you wanted to do that. Uh,
Could you just really can you just like, oh, I don't want this one line? Is there an easy way to just be like, I'm pulling that line out? Okay.
I can go to.
It's like for Cameo, you release it, pull out the one you don't want, and make it again.
Yeah, the editing on here is very, very, very simple.
But like you said, you've done most of your editing on Illustrator, so
Yeah, and again, I haven't done a whole lot of editing in Cricut because I just got so frustrated because it's like It's like you're trying to do design work in Microsoft Word.
Right,
You
right.
can do it, but it's just a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Uh, I could have swore I could edit vector points on here. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's Cricut. I would not recommend to do your editing in, but if you have a Cricut cutter, you can still use it. Silhouette Studio is probably better for actually editing stuff and doing your stuff in there if you don't want to use another software. Like I said, I use the Cricut software mainly as the interface to bring in my images to cut that are all prepped and ready to go.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I honestly have really wanted to learn um, Inkscape, which is a vector editing program, as well as I know someone said GIMP, and I can't remember if GIMP had vector editing abilities.
Says but no vectors.
Yeah, so GIMP is like Photoshop, and it's open source, and Inkscape is another
Is GIMP
open.
just a website or is it like a program?
No, it's a program. So like it is Photoshop, or it's a program that you download and install on your computer, and
Gotcha.
you can do that. Inkscape is like Illustrator, where you can do vector editing within there. So if you don't want to pay for something like Illustrator, highly recommend doing Inkscape. And I wanted to learn how to do Inkscape so I can teach people how to use it
Mhm.
as a tool. Um, Already says GIMP is Photoshop for poor people. Basically.
Wonderful. That's all of us.
So again, I haven't used Silhouette Studio or Inkscape enough to say what it can and can't do, but it seemed like they sound like they'll be basically doing the same thing. And Silhouette Studio seems like it has a pretty robust editor to do what you need it to do. So yeah, that is how we prep stencils. Super easy. And I find everybody does it slightly differently.
Yep,
And do what works best for you, I guess.
absolutely.
Yeah, that I think will conclude this. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them off right now. I was busy talking away. So, yeah. And if you have any questions outside of this, feel free to shoot me, the Dyers Guild, the DM, or bug Brittany if you like her way better. Or if you really want, you can bug Xander because he is very proficient in Silhouette Studio. So, yeah.
It was interesting. I really didn't know Cricut was, like, that different. Like, even the words are different. I kinda figured everything was kinda standardized, and it was like, "Oh, this is slightly different." But no, it's completely different.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I don't think there's any other questions here. Thank you for joining us on this month's dye-a-thon, where we actually didn't dye a disc, but we showed you how to prep stuff for dyeing a disc, which I was going to do anyways to dye a disc. So we just kind of skipped that after step. So, all right. With that being said, see you guys later. Until next time, find your line, craft your